Three siblings, Michael Murphy, 29, his younger sister Nora, 27, and Ellen, 18, were violently murdered between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. December 1898 while returning home from a cancelled dance in Gatton, the colony of Queensland, now known as Australia. There were several suspects to include family members, but after a 5-month investigation, no one was charged with their deaths, and the failure of investigators to solve the case has led to accusations of a cover-up and nasty rumors within and about the Murphy family. Their case remains unsolved. This is episode 3 of Archive Dive, a mystery from history. The Murphy family had a farm at Blackfellows Creek, around 8 miles from the town of Gatton. In the 1901 census, Gatton's population at the time was 449, so I believe it's fair to say it was a relatively small town. In 1889, Michael Murphy and his brother Daniel both left Gatton, working and living in separate towns, and had returned home for the Christmas holidays to visit with family. On December 26, 1889, known as Boxing Day, Michael took his sister Ellen to the Mount Syrian races in Caffey. Around 8 p.m., Michael, Ellen, and their other sister Nora would leave home to attend a dance that was being held in Gatton Hall. But when they arrived around 9 p.m., they found the dance had been canceled and at that time decided to head back home, but they never made it back home. The next morning, their mother, Miss Murphy, noted that the 3 children weren't home and she was concerned, so she sent her son-in-law William to go look for the Murphy siblings. Michael had borrowed William's sulky to take him and the siblings to the dance, which left distinctive tracks because of the wobbling wheel, which William was able to follow along a rough winding trail that led him to Michael, Ellen, and Nora's bodies in a field a little over a mile outside of Gatton. Their bodies were found neatly spread on a rug. Michael and Ellen were lying back to back within 2 feet of another, and Nora laid at the same east-west orientation, forming a triangle. Both women had their hands tied behind their backs with handkerchiefs. William's horse had been shot in the head and was laying between the shafts of the cart. The Murphy siblings' legs were arranged with intention of their feet pointing west. Australian authorities say this was a very signature behavior that has never been repeated in Australian crime history. The Murphys' other sibling, Daniel, was an officer at Brisbane Police Headquarters, and he received a telegram from his family and friends on the 27th of December informing him of the murder of his siblings. Daniel immediately applied for a 3-day leave, and it was granted. He attempted to catch a train back home, but missed it, and returned back to the headquarters to discover that no action was being taken by detectives in the criminal investigation branch because there were rumors already circulating that this was simply a hoax. Because of this, there was a 5-hour delay getting information through the correct official channels that his siblings had actually been murdered. This was not a hoax, which meant that a team of investigators did not arrive until 7:30 a.m. the following morning after the bodies were discovered to begin investigating. The Murphy siblings' bodies were moved to the Brainborough Hotel at 4 p.m. and Dr. Van Loonberg, the government medical officer of Ipswich, performed a 4-hour-long autopsy that indicated that Michael had been struck with a blunt instrument on the right side of his head. Ellen's skull had been fractured by 2 blows to the left side of her head, and based on the wounds, it was determined that both Ellen and Michael were in a sitting position back to back when they were struck. They were able to determine that Nora had also been struck on the left side of her head and had a harness strap tied around her neck tight enough to likely be the cause of her death. It was also determined that both girls had been sexually assaulted. William would later testify when discovering the bodies he didn't think that Michael's hands were tied, but it appeared that his hands had been tied behind his back at some point, with one holding on to an open purse. However, investigators stated that when they arrived on scene, Michael's hands were not tied, but there was a strap that lay nearby, and the empty purse was lying a short distance from Michael's body. It was eventually speculated that Michael's hands were likely tied behind his back initially, but then untied by the killer so that he was able to access the purse. It would later be determined after going over interviews with people who had seen the bodies at the scene that Michael may have actually been shot, despite this not being discovered in the initial autopsy. It would take all 3 bodies to be ordered to be exhumed before they would find that the original autopsies were no more than just superficial examinations, and despite the decomposition being advanced, they were able to find that Michael had been shot in the right side of the head and subsequently struck on the same spot with a blunt instrument. This would partially obstruct the bullet hole in the beginning, but the bullet was recovered from his skull. There was a lot of chaos and different stories surrounding the burial of the Murphy siblings' bodies and accusations that an autopsy wasn't actually performed on their bodies before they were initially buried. There were several people included in the list of suspects. One of them was a man named Thomas Day, who was employed as a butcher in Gatton and lived in a hut around 900 feet from the murder scene. He had been seen by a number of witnesses on previous nights walking along the road where the Murphy siblings vanished. One witness even claims they saw Thomas washing blood from a pullover a few days after the murder. He was also suspected in the murder of Alfred Stephen Hill just a few weeks prior to the Gatton murders, and they determined that the same type of revolver had been used in both crimes. Shortly after being questioned in the Murphy murders, Thomas would enlist in the Australian Army, but would end up deserting in 1899. After a 5-month investigation, no one was ever officially charged or arrested in their murders, and their cases remain unsolved. It's crazy to me that there was only a 5-month investigation and there is no follow-up on this suspect after he deserted from the military. I will see you guys back here next week with another mystery from history.